this is a great job. They pay me money to do this. If you have no border, you have no country. The first round of the gunfight went just over my head and hit the train. What do you know about armor-piercing round? We were allowed to do our job, but I don't know who they are. They could be cartel, they could be anybody. What the wall is it helps direct the traffic. I found out that illegal aliens paid a whole lot of attention when you had a bayonet on the end of your rifle. I had been working at an indoor shooting range in Lubbock, Texas, straight out of college. It was minimum wage and it was the best I could do at the time, plus it was fun. The owner of the gun store was a deputy U.S. Marshal, and that got me interested in law enforcement. And I ended up working for the U.S. Marshal Service for about 2.5 years. And I went into my boss one day, his name was Ronnie, really good dude. And I said, Ronnie, I think I've made a mistake here. He said, what's wrong? I said, all I'm doing all day long is sitting in court, listening to lawyers argue about the meaning of words and waiting for a prisoner to jump up and try to kill one of them. And at this point, I'm not sure I'd stop him. I might just let him go. He said, well, what do you want? I said, you know what? I want car chases and foot chases and snatching people up by the hair on their head and gunfights and riots. And he goes, oh, well, you want the Border Patrol? They're on the 3rd floor. And I literally got up and got in the elevator, went to the 3rd floor, found the first Border Patrol agent I could, and told him I'd like to be a Border Patrol agent. He looked me up and down. I don't think that's going to work. I said, why not? He said, because you're small, you're tiny. And I said, yeah, but I'm mean. He said, man, sit down, let's talk for a minute.
Yeah.
About 30 minutes later, I had an application, and 3 months later, I was at the Border Patrol Academy. And that's how I became Border Patrol agent. So I arrived at the academy in Glencoe, Georgia.
Sorry, how long was the academy?
Academy was 5 months long back then. Toughest federal academy in the entire system. Law, Spanish, PT, firearms, driving.
And you spoke Spanish at the time?
I did not. I spoke no Spanish whatsoever.
They hire people who don't speak Spanish?
Absolutely. 5-month academy. They have a very effective Spanish program, which later on I got to teach. And the effectiveness was you have 5 months, you get 3 hours of Spanish instruction a day, and we will give you 10 tests, and if you fail one, you go home.
So where did they ship you out to?
Leaving the academy,
Or did you get a choice?
No choice in the matter.
Okay.
You want the job? Well, the way they put it was, your paycheck's in El Paso, Texas. You like money? I like money. Well, then you like El Paso, Texas. And so that was my first posting, was El Paso, Texas.
And your wife, she's from Illinois. What was her
Lisa,
take on El Paso?
Lisa thought that I had taken her to the surface of the moon. She's a trooper, and she stuck with it, and was a great Border Patrol wife. But yeah, that was very, very different from even Lubbock, where we had been living. El Paso was very different because Lisa spoke no Spanish whatsoever. I remember we went to go set up a bank account, and Lisa and I are standing in line. We're about 4th in line, and all the people in front of us are Hispanic, and they're walking up to the teller, and they're speaking in Spanish. And so it's our turn. The lady says, "En qué puedo ayudarle?" How can I help you? And Lisa says, I'm sorry, I don't speak Spanish. And the gal says, well, maybe you ought to. I thought I was going to have to grab her by the belt to keep her from going over the counter. It was difficult. It was a challenge. But, we made it work.
When you first hit the field in El Paso, straight out of the academy, what was the equipment like? Was it top end?
It was
well-equipped?
absolutely horrendous. We had no resources. We had nothing. I'll give you an example. Very early on in working in El Paso, we got assigned it. Everybody goes to the muster room. You get your assignment for the night, and they throw you your keys, and you grab your steed, and off you go to make America safe. So one night, the FOS, the field operations supervisor, says, "Fenley, you're at Charlie 19." Okay, and he threw me a set of keys. So I look at the keys, and it's a Dodge Ram Charger. Now, this is 1993. The Ram Charger was a 1988. And I go out, and I went to open the door, and the door almost fell off because the hinges had been broken off. And so somebody had taken a drill and drilled about 6 holes and used flexicuffs, the plastic handcuffs, to attach the door. You had to pick it up to shut it. And so I get inside, and I thought, well, this is not good. This is really not good.
Nothing but the best for our federal agents.
Exactly. So I get inside. It actually started. It was good. No air conditioner, no radio, but it actually started. Okay, we're on the road. And I keep hearing this road noise. And I look down, and it was a piece of plywood. The floorboard underneath the driver's side had rotted away or been torn away. And so they just cut a piece of plywood. You could pick that plywood up and see the front drive shaft on the four-wheel drive turn. You could have had the Fred Flintstone, braking system if you wanted. It was just horrendous. We just had very few resources. The patrol was much smaller then, and nobody really cared about us. That changed over the years, especially after 9/11. We got massive funding after that and really expanded the patrol. But yeah, the early years were, it was difficult. It was a hard job, and it was made harder because we had to beg, borrow, and steal. Fort Bliss is there in El Paso. That's the U.S. Army, big base there. We would take ammunition that they couldn't get through their supply chain and trade it for M16 parts that we couldn't get, and everybody was happy. You just found a way to get the job done. That's all.
Well, speaking of Ram Chargers.
Ram Chargers, they were
Was
really...
that standard issue? Or was it just kind of mishmash?
It was mix and match. When I first got on, they were late 80s Ram Chargers and early 90s, late 80s, early 90s Suburbans with the old...
Oh, because you need something to haul people around.
Oh, yeah. And you'd be surprised how many people you can put in a Suburban.
What's your record?
Or a Ram Charger, for that matter.
What's your record?
We also... I think the statute of limitations has run out on that.
Okay.
My record is 27 aliens in a Suburban with a 1952 Schwinn bicycle. It was tight, but we got it done.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one night I was assigned a Ram Charger, and I drove off, and the area I was assigned to we called the Sand Hills, and it was just across the New Mexico border, and it's just it's at the corner of no and where, okay? But it was a popular crossing area for the illegal aliens. But that night, it was a giant rainstorm, which for El Paso, Texas is very rare, but it's sort of like here, when it rains, So I'm sitting in the truck, the radio is silent, the sensors are not going off, nobody's crossing, not in this weather. And I don't know, about 3 hours into the shift, I felt a drip on my shoulder, and then another one, and then another one. What in Thor's hammer's going on here? So I look up, directly in line with the M16 rifle rack, there was a tiny little hole. It was suspiciously about 0.223 inches in diameter, right in line with the rifle rack. and the water was dripping down and hit me in the shoulder. And I knew immediately what had happened. Somebody had racked a rifle without clearing it and put a round through the roof of that Ram Charger. So, oh wow, look at that. Then I got to thinking about it. Well, it'd been raining for 2.5 hours, 3 hours, and it didn't drip on me. Why did it start now? So I drove to an underpass where I could get out of the rain, got out my flashlight, and started searching around. And sure enough, I found this ancient, desiccated piece of gum in the floorboard that somebody had taken gum and plugged that hole and turned that vehicle in and just kind of whistled past the graveyard and didn't say a word. So, you know what I did? I drove to Allsup's, got a pack of gum, and did the exact same thing. 80% of the people that I caught were just good, honest, hard-working folks. They're just trying to pay the rent. But that other 20% are some of the worst people on the planet. Just horrible.
Such as?
The people that are, well, today they call it human trafficking. Back then we called it alien smuggling. People running dope, people running guns, just horrible, ruthless people. And what made it difficult is you might surprise a group of 30 people, and you got about an hour. You got to walk down the hill, get back to the vehicle, because the radios don't work. You could never get a signal out to get back up, and even if you could, backup was an hour and a half away. You have to figure it out on your own. So you got these 30 people that you got to walk down a mountain in the dark. In that 30 people, there might be one or two that will kill you right now. So you got to figure out which ones are your main threat. You learn to start judging people very quickly in less than a couple of seconds and being right more than you're wrong, and figure out who the problem child is. And then when you do, especially if he starts acting up, immediately put him down on the ground, put your knee on his neck, put your knee on his neck, and tell everybody else, I'll do the same to you. And generally, if you get that one or two guys under control very quickly, the rest will follow suit. One of my favorite tricks was anytime I saw a potential problem child, I would find the oldest, cripplest grandma, and I'd flex-a-cuff them together. So your young buck that might be a problem, I hope he can drag 78 pounds of grandma with him, because it's going to slow him down.
Where are you staged up? What are you watching? And then when you see, tell me the process of how that develops and how they end up in the truck.
You know, for whatever shift you're working, you're assigned a patrol area. And back then we were given great latitude as to how we patrolled that area. And over time, you realized there were vast swaths of places you didn't need to be there. Nobody was crossing there. And there were a few places that were very popular and were going to get you most of your arrest. And so you would set up on those places, hide yourself, hide your vehicle, get out on foot, and wait. We also had a sensor network that was somewhat effective. It was Vietnam-era sensors that would tell you when people were walking across the ground. And knowing where to put those sensors was an art form that I never mastered. Our sensor guys were amazing. But that was helpful, because then your radio would tell you that you had a sensor hit, and you knew where, you at least knew where to look. And so you would wait until they got into an area where it was hard for them to run and get away. And,
such as?
Well, for example, in Santa Teresa, New Mexico, there was an area in between the two railroad tracks that come into El Paso from Arizona, the high tracks and the low tracks. And there was a bowl in between those two railroad tracks as the elevation dropped off. And if you could get them into that bowl, they had nowhere to run. They had nowhere to, well, I mean, they would run, of course, but you could catch them, you know. So that was a great place. There was another place in Santa Teresa that was wide open with mesquite dunes, and there was a high fence around the school, and on the other side of the school was a subdivision. If they beat you over the fence, you could never dig them out of the houses. They had too many places to run and hide. And so you always tried to get them before they could get to the fence, because once they made it over the fence, you were only going to catch maybe 10%. The rest were going to hide from you and get away. So a lot of the strategy was trying to time your announcement of the Border Patrol is in fact here and you are in fact under arrest into the right area so that you could get the majority of them and get them out.
Is this typically at night?
Most of my work was done at night.
So you got your sensors have gone off. You know now where to go look. Do you have night vision? How do you know where they're?
Initially, we didn't have night vision. One night, I guess probably around 1996, I'd been on the job for 3 or 4 years. My boss came to muster, and he said, "Here, Fenley, play with this and tell me if it's any good." And he threw me this little green package. It looks military, and it was PVS 7's first generation night vision, and that was the instruction I got. And then he said, "Oh, and by the way, don't break it or lose it. Just don't come back if you do." Said, "Oh, okay." So I went and took it out, and I thought I was James Bond. Man, let me tell you, I put it up to my face and turned it on, and I thought, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. This is amazing. I'm going to catch the whole world. This is great. But nobody trained us in how to use them. We had gotten them on loan from the Army, and they came with no instructions. Well, it turns out that you shouldn't drive with NVGs because you have no depth perception whatsoever, and you will wreck the truck. I mean, you will wreck it. And you shouldn't run with them in the desert, because what looks to be a little shallow depression is actually a ditch, and you will break your leg. And so, you know, it was a force multiplier, but it was also, you had to be careful on when and how you used it. And over time, we figured out how to employ those things. But initially, we didn't have any night vision. What we did have was something called the Fred truck, and it was an infrared camera off of an F-111 Aardvark fighter plane.
Okay.
And it was mounted to a mast, and it showed up on a little tiny TV screen about this big, but it was infrared. That was pretty effective. We could put that on a high point and cover almost 2 miles. And if anything's moving, you're going to see it. But when they worked well.
Yeah.
But we, by and large, didn't have those things initially. We had an old Vietnam-era angled 90-degree angle flashlight.
Yeah.
There you go.
That was your night vision.
There you go.
So you see a group. How do you? What do you yell? You yell something at them, and at what distance do you close before you announce your presence?
Everybody has a different way of doing it.
That's not a standard training thing.
Trial and error taught me to get as close to the group as I could before announcing. And I'm not a big yeller. I didn't like yelling. I liked whispering, "Border Patrol's here, get in the truck." When you yell and start, flailing your arms around, people, and then they run, and I got to chase them and dig them out. And instead, whenever I could, I'd get close enough, tap them on the shoulder, and turn around and see the uniform and go, "Okay, well, you got me."
So how much of your training was involved in physically restraining people?
Our PT department at the academy was extremely good, very good. And I had 2 PT instructors, Mr. McGlasson and Mr. Murray. Mr. McGlasson was a former Iowa State wrestler. When he put you on the ground, you were not going anywhere. And he taught that to our entire class. So there was a heavy focus on, I won't say hand-to-hand, because you don't want to do combat with anybody. You just want to control. But there was a heavy emphasis on being able to control people physically with your hands instead of threatening them with, you know, some other less lethal weapon or a firearm.
And so when does the firearm come out?
When I think that you have the ability and intent to kill me, that's when the firearm comes out. As good as my training was from the Border Patrol, the learning curve in the field was very steep, very steep. You had to figure out very quickly how to do the job because you don't want to get hurt and you don't want to hurt anybody. I mean, nobody goes to work and says, today I just want to hurt people. You know, that doesn't happen.
Right.
Everybody's just trying to pay the rent. Just get in a truck, we'll take care of it, you know. So it was a very steep learning curve. I'll tell you this, brand new out of the academy, I couldn't have had maybe 2 weeks on the job, okay? The boss comes in and he's got all the trainees, one of which I am, are all lined up against the wall, standing at attention, and he looks down. He looks at me and I thought, oh, this is not good. He looks at me and he asked my training officer, he says, this one right here, what's his name? That's Agent Fenley. I said, well, can he shoot? And he said, oddly enough, that's the one thing he can do, is shoot. And he says, all right, come with me, you're my new tunnel rat. What? Okay, so turns out there's a network of tunnels underneath El Paso that lead to the Rio, so that when you get those torrential rains, they all go through the tunnels and into the Rio Grande River. Okay, had no idea. So he says, all right, take your shotgun and this flashlight. There's illegal aliens in that tunnel. Well, the tunnel was, you couldn't stand up in it, you know, and I'm only 5'9". I couldn't stand up in it, so you had to hunch over. It was the most horrific thing. They have germs that they hadn't even named yet down there. They had mice that had no eyeballs, third or fourth generation mice that had never seen daylight, so they don't need eyes. Just horrible. And so you had illegal aliens that were coming up from the Rio Grande, getting into these tunnels, and then they would pop up in downtown El Paso underneath the network of highways we called the Spaghetti Bowl. So somebody had to go in the tunnels and dig them out. And so after I did that 3 or 4 times, I finally asked the boss one day, I said, why am I carrying a shotgun in the tunnels?
Yeah, that's what's going to be my question.
He said, you might need it. And I said, it's a concrete tube that I can't even stand up in. He said, well, don't carry it then. So I gave that a little bit of a thought, and I said, you know what, I'll stick with the pistol. Our pistols back then they were not pistols, they were revolvers. And it was
y'all carried wheel guns?
Oh yeah, Ruger GP 100, Smith & Wesson 686, 357. Very effective, very, very good weapons. Reliable, hit hard.
Work in the dirt.
Yes, yes. And but I gave it some thought, and I said, I'll take my chances with the handgun. I'm not carrying this shotgun. Plus, it was heavy. I got other things I got to carry. So I ditched the shotgun for tunnel work. But they made me a tunnel rat, and I dug people out of tunnels for a while. 24 April 1994. Some train bandits decided to rob the train at the Anapra Curve, which was one of our hot spots. That's where the trains, the tracks come in from Arizona, mainly, and make a 90-degree turn before they can get through the Franklin Mountains.
Okay.
It makes them slow down greatly. They have to drop speed from 50 miles an hour down to about 5. Okay. Where those tracks are is only 30 feet, 40 feet from Mexico. And the bandits know this. And this has been going on since Pancho Villa, 1917. We're talking third generation, fourth generation train bandits.
Yeah.
These, I come to work, I do my job. These guys come to work and they rob trains. That's what they do.
Yeah.
And so it was very common for the bandits to catch an outbound train to Arizona or further out, and they would catch an inbound train, and they'd spend the hours on that train going from car to car and busting the seals and looking at what was inside. Okay, if it's patio furniture, move on. If it's tennis shoes or rifles from Remington, yeah. And so what they would do is bust the seals open and then spend the rest of the trip back in, stacking the boxes in these containers onto the rear end of the train. And then when they got to the Anapra curve, where they knew the train was going to be slow anyway, what they do is reach down with a little homemade tool and disconnect the air hose. So on a train, the only way the brakes stay open is with air pressure. When you disconnect one of the hoses, the train thinks, bad thing, we're stopping right now. And so they would disconnect the air hose, cause the train to stop. They would toss all the boxes onto the ground where other people were waiting the 30 feet from Mexico, and they would run it all back into Mexico, and you were robbed. Okay?
And how many people are involved in this operation?
Oh, it depends. It depends on the crew. Well, back then, I don't know anymore. I'm retired, but back then it depended on the crew. There was one crew that had 25 people. So you had 4 or 5 on the train, and the rest were on the ground, and unless you were literally right there when it happened, you couldn't catch them. They were gone. They were in Mexico. The train bandits were problematic, very difficult to defend against.
Yeah.
And every once in a while you'd get lucky, and when you got lucky and you happened to be right there and you were going to get them all and the goods, that's when the gunfire started. That night, my partner and I, and we talked about this earlier, that my partner and I just happened to be out there for a different reason. We were looking for a particular smuggler that was really good. I mean, he had beaten us so many times. And okay, well now you've made it my purpose in life to find you, okay? We were out there hunting him. About that time, here comes a train, and then we hear the air hoses disconnect. Well, okay, we know exactly what's about to happen.
And so this is at night?
Yes.
And so y'all are stashed, hidden away where? In a
no.
vehicle or in the brush?
Oh no, we're patrolling on foot.
On foot?
Yes. My partner had an MP5 submachine gun, and I had a M16A2 rifle. When we heard the train air hose disconnect, we knew, okay, it's a train robbery, so we'll stop what we're doing and we'll deal with this. And we just happened to be, 30 yards away. So as soon as the train stopped, we jumped over onto the other side, on the Mexican side of the train. Not in Mexico, understand. We're still in the U.S., of course.
In that little 50-foot strip between the train and the river.
Strip, and we can see it's like rats abandoning a ship, It just, everybody's, it's elbows and rear ends. Everybody's grabbing as many boxes as they can and running into Mexico.
Are they carrying flashlights, headlamps? Or are they just doing this all in the dark?
No.
What kind of moonlight is there? I mean, how well can you see?
It depends. There have been times with a full moon that your eyes get so adjusted that you'll actually put your hand over your face like this so that you can see what you need to see with a full moon, okay? And then there are nights that it's blacker than the inside of a cow. You can't see. You can put your hand right there, unless you could feel your breath, you didn't know your hand was there. So and everything in between. They call it a smuggler's moon for a reason, when the moon is 3/4 or full. That night there was a lot of moonlight, which almost led to my demise. That night Those guys had a guy in Mexico, just barely in Mexico. I mean, maybe 75 yards. He had a 30-30 lever action. And the first round of the gunfight went just over my head and hit the train. And then it got exciting for a little bit. So we found out later that he and I had discussed that matter, him with his 30-30 and me with my M16, and we had solved it. He was not going to rob trains anymore. So it very difficult to defend in that location because geography is against you. Very difficult to defend against the train bandits right there at the Anapra curve. And it's still there today. Hey, Fenley, Dateline 2020, and Maria Schreiber's going to come down and interview you about your shooting. And it's important to the Border Patrol because we're trying to get a wall built. Back then, the Border Patrol actually cared about building a wall and stopping people. Imagine that.
Yeah.
So I said, Maria Schreiber? Really? Yeah, there's going to be this date, this time. We want you in rough duty uniform, not dress uniform, but you better look sharp. So Elizabeth Vargas shows up with her whole crew, you know, with all the lights and cameras and everything else. So they're going to interview me about my shooting. And the Border Patrol has told me, hey, dude, don't mess this up. Do not jack this up. This is very important because we're pushing to try to build a wall here, and this is going to help. So she shows up and does an interview and took her on a tour of the border, took her on a tour of our equipment, which was non-existent. She said, well, now I want to go out and I want to film you catching illegal aliens. and I'm thinking, I'm not going to drag this sea anchor, you know, in high heel shoes into the high desert and try to catch wets with, illegal aliens. You know, are you kidding me? So we found a place where we could get some easy catches, you know, that weren't too terribly dangerous to anybody. So we finally, it took a while, but we finally got 3 poor what we call day trippers. So just about the time, because, you know, it's dark. I mean, for Pete's sake, it's 2 in the morning. I know I have illegals in front of me, but I don't know who they are. They could be cartel. They could be anybody. And so I'm just to put what I called the writ of habeas grab-em-uppus. I'm just about to do that to him. And that cameraman turned on his light. And I couldn't decide if I wanted to catch the aliens more or kill him. We talked about this, dude. Dateline 2020 did the whole thing. They stayed with me for about 7 hours. They edited it down to about 30 minutes, and they put the most ugly 30 minutes in there. I mean, maybe I'm being pretentious, but I did some good work on camera. Yeah, they didn't put that in there.
Yeah.
They put the ugly 30 minutes in there. When I was describing the threats that we faced, I had a table full of homemade weapons that had been, and commercial-made weapons that we had taken from illegal aliens. You know, guys that I knew by name had seized that because they tried to use it to kill my men. And we had a table laid out, and I was picking up each one and showing them everything from machetes all the way to belt-fed machine guns. Okay?
Yeah.
Well, they cut all that out. Well, here's the threat. Here's what we're looking at every day. Well, that never made it to Dateline 2020. You know, when I talked about the behaviors of, and JP, let me tell you this. 90% of the people that I arrested and deported were good people. They're just people like you and me. Everybody's got to pay the rent.
Yeah.
Okay? They're just good people just trying to slip by us so they can earn more money in America than they could in Mexico, okay? But 10% will kill everybody and eat supper on their chest. They don't care. And the 10% that we battle, that kill my men, that got cut out. That's not right. That's not fair.
From Studio 3B in New York, here is Stone Phillips.
There are few issues that get many Americans as hot under the collar as the issue of illegal aliens, how to stop them from entering America, how to pay for tightening up our borders. Here's Elizabeth Vargas.
This crossing point over the Rio Grande River was once the most dangerous place in El Paso. The Black Bridge was home to violent Mexican gangs who crossed over illegally into this country every day. They raped and they murdered, and police here couldn't catch them because the gangs could escape quickly back into Mexico. But since Operation Hold the Line, that's all changed. But when we visited El Paso recently, we found that Hold the Line's success has come at a high price, surprisingly to the Border Patrol itself. While downtown El Paso may now be a safer place to live, its border is a more violent place to work.
Immediately dropped down and more gunshots came in our direction.
Agent Brian Fenley says attacks on the Border Patrol are more frequent and more violent. Since Hold the Line, he says illegals are opening fire, most recently at him and his partner when they caught a gang robbing televisions and VCRs from a train.
I saw the group of aliens that were shooting at him as they fled back towards Mexico. They continued to fire then at him and I both. This is a vehicle.
Violence against Border Patrol agents is way up in the last 6 months. With the collapse of the peso, people are more desperate to get out of Mexico and often more dangerous. Since October, there have been 60 attacks on Border Patrol agents. There have been no deaths, but 7 have been hurt.
The people that we deal with are getting more frustrated, more violent, and they're becoming better and better armed.
Do you do your job any differently now that you've had these increased incidences of violence?
I have to treat every person out there as if this may be the person that tries to hurt or kill me.
And much of the crime that afflicted El Paso has simply moved 10 miles west to suburban Sunland Park. In fact, though violence is up all along the border with Mexico, it is up most dramatically in the El Paso area, home of Operation Hold the Line. Still see Hold the Line as a success.
Absolutely.
But is it? Consider this. While illegal crossings into El Paso are down about 70%, at Tucson, Arizona and McAllen, Texas, major crossing points nearby, they are way up. But aren't you just pushing the problem over there for somebody in Arizona or Laredo to handle?
I think what we've done, which has people upset, is we have proven that we can control and manage a border.
But with the increased violence his men are facing, Reyes admits he can no longer keep illegals out without a lot more money from taxpayers. He is now fighting for funds to buy night vision cameras, powerful spotlights, ground sensors, additional personnel, and a 10-foot-high fence at the most dangerous part of the border.
It's hard to put a dollar figure on all that. It runs literally into the millions of dollars.
How do you respond to critics who say, you know what, he's asking for millions of dollars worth of equipment now? See, Operation Hold the Line in the traditional sense didn't work.
What is it worth to this country to maintain and have border control? If you want us to protect the border of this country, then there is a dollar figure attached to it.
The border doesn't stop bullets. Either way, coming from either direction. The way I was taught and the way as a firearms instructor I taught 2 generations of Border Patrol agents is, do you remember the old Bugs Bunny where you had the guy on Mars? I was expecting the giant kaboom. You know, he's trying to kill the entire planet. And so the way I taught my Border Patrol agents, if somebody's trying to kill you, and they're on Mars, and you have the giant kaboom cannon, kill them. What are we talking about here? You know, get it done. It's either you or me. No, I'm going home. I'm going home to Lisa. It was never an issue in my day if you drop somebody, which side of the fence they were on. Were they trying to kill you? Yes. Okay. Write the report and let's go home. You know, see you tomorrow. I'm given to understand it's different now, politically. And it's only different because it's political. I'm one of the few Border Patrol agents that was repeatedly told to think more inside the box. I was the crazy guy, you know. I was the gun nut. Yeah. Why you have a rifle? I don't know. Why do you have a fire extinguisher?
Yeah.
You expect to have a fire tonight? Yeah. You know, that sort of thing.
Uh-huh.
So anyway, it occurred to me one night because I saw a illegal alien pull a knife on another illegal alien, and I saw his response.
How did the guy respond that was on the receiving end of that
He
knife?
was terrified. Terrified.
Okay.
Well, I'd pointed weapons at illegal aliens before, and they were like, eh. But I saw that, and I said, you know what? Back at the house, I've got a bayonet for an M16. So I took my bayonet to work, and humping the arroyos there in Cristo Rey Mountains, I found out that illegal aliens paid a whole lot of attention when you had a bayonet on the end of your rifle. I didn't care why. I just knew that when I put a bayonet on my rifle, that I got more compliance. It was easier to get 30 people in the truck than before. So one night, I had more people than I could fit in the truck. And I was marching them down an arroyo out of Cristo Rey Mountains at bayonet point. And I caught when I finally got my radio to work, because that was a huge problem. You know, no resources. We never got good radios, repeater towers, nothing.
Right.
You know, so when I finally got it back into radio reception, I called for a transport unit. We sometimes had big vans that were just circling around waiting for people like me to call them, and they would come and pick up all your illegal aliens. So I called, got a hold of a transport, told him where I was. I'm at the 480 draw. Okay. So here I come, marching these guys out, and gals, and children, marching them out. And it happened to be a supervisor, one of my bosses, that was driving that van. And he saw that bayonet, and he said, tell me I don't see what I see. He was like, the bayonet, we're all going to jail. We can't do that. We're going to be on CNN at 11 o'clock this evening. Wait, this is bad. This is very bad. He said, why is it bad? I didn't poke anybody yet. You know, you can't put a bayonet on the M16. Says who? I read the Border Patrol handbook. The next day, midnight shift, we show up at muster, where all the Border Patrol agents get together and sit in one room, and they give assignments, and what vehicle you're going to use, and any intel that might be important. You know, they give it all out at the same time, and then everybody scatters, you know, to their 16 miles of border. Okay. Muster. All right, so we got a new policy signed by the patrol agent in charge. Border Patrol agents are not allowed to affix bayonets to M16. And of course, everybody just... Fenley, that's a Fenley rule.
Okay.
Sorry. You know, it's like a Seinfeld thing. I'm sorry, was that bad? Should I not have done that? But it seems like any time that I found, or like-minded Border Patrol agents found, an effective way to catch more aliens or dope, we were hamstrung. Now you can't do that. Well, says who? Why can't I do that? And the longer I served in the patrol, the more I realized that nobody wanted us to succeed. There was one particular area that was near the railroad tracks that had a bluff that kind of looked over the railroad tracks. the bluff was in Mexico. The tracks were barely 30 feet in the U.S. Anyway, this particular area was known for catching rocks. Anytime you drove down there, because of the proximity to the Mexican border, you were going to catch a rock. And it's a ton of paperwork if you get a broken windshield or you know the roof caved in. It was just a lot of hassle.
So they're standing on the bluff
Yes,
across the border,
yes,
chunking stuff down on your
Yes.
truck.
yes. One of the most effective tools they had was discarded brake shoes off the train. Those things, you talk about a rock, no, that brake shoe off a train, that'll cave in a windshield, nothing flat. So anyway, one particular day, and it was early in the morning on a Sunday, I got a radio call from one of the railroad guys. They had a shack in between the two tracks where they kept a guy. I have no idea why, but they kept a guy out there, and he called and says, "I'm being rocked by the aliens. I'm being rocked by the aliens." I said, "I'll be there in a second." So across the tracks, got in between the train tracks in Mexico, and I can see them starting to line up on the bluff, but I was able to scoot past them before they could rock me. Got down there, I caught, I don't know, 5 or 6 of them. They were young, but I got them in the truck, and all they were doing was just throwing rocks at his shack. They weren't trying to hurt anybody. Sunday morning, they were out for a lark. But now I've turned around and I realized, oh, I got 7 or 8 dudes up there, and they're just gonna rock. It's gonna destroy my truck. And I'm thinking of the paperwork I'm gonna have to do. This is bad. And then I had this great idea. I always carried a whole bunch of flexi-cuffs, you know, the long plastic handcuffs in my tricky bag. And the idea came to me when I saw one of the people I had arrested, one of the young men I had arrested. He looked up there and he says, este Juanito. He knew him by name.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they're piling rocks. You know, it's almost biblical. You know, they're piling them up, waiting for me. Everybody knows what's about to happen, but that's when it occurred to me. Wait a minute, they know each other. They live together right there in Anapra. They're friends. I wonder, you know what? So I took one and I flexi cuffed him to the hood. Another one to the roof, and one on the rack on the back of the truck, and flexi cuffed them, you know, to the outside of the vehicle, and then just slowly ambled past. And there was one guy up there, probably not the sharpest of the group, that he actually threw a rock, and so all my illegal aliens that I have flexi cuffed to the outside of the vehicle are now yelling at him, "I know you. Don't you do that. I will find you." And I didn't take a single rock, not a single rock. So I got back out and back onto the hard top. Well, lo and behold, one of my bosses was right there. You know, I didn't expect to see him there. He's right there. So I pull up and get out my Leatherman and start cutting them off the outside of the truck. And he says, what have you done? What? He's like, "Oh no, we're all going to jail. This is going to be on CNN. It's bad. This is very bad." I said, "What's bad? I didn't take a rock." And shortly thereafter, it was announced at muster that, in case anybody was unclear on the concept, we do not use human shields on the outside of a marked patrol unit, ever.
So what about drug busts? Did you catch any drugs?
Quite a bit over the years. I wasn't as good at catching dope as some of my other Border Patrol agent buddies. Some of those guys called them dope hounds. They were really good, really good. But I got one good hit one day when we were sitting at muster. They put out at muster, "Be on the lookout for the following vehicle," and they had a partial plate and a good description. Well, being the young guy, I'm writing everything down. You know, the old guys are like, okay, just let me out of here. So I'm writing everything down, put it in my pocket, get in with my journeyman, and we're driving down I-10 headed towards New Mexico, where we're going to be assigned that day. And I look in front of me, and I look again. The vehicle matches, the partial plate matches, everything matches. So I brought out my book. Hey, you know what, boss? You're not going to believe this, but that's the Bolo. It was a vehicle that had run the port of entry, presumably loaded with drugs, and had just run through. You know, almost hit the immigration inspector.
Bolo, be on the lookout.
Correct. And got away. I said, that's the one they called out at muster. He said, really? I said, yeah, really? Light him up. Let's get him. You know, hey, we get to be good guys. Come on. And so we did. We lit him up, and we pulled him over in the parking lot of Cielo Vista Mall there in El Paso. It was hot, man. It was hot. Pulled him out of the vehicle at gunpoint. I'm giving him commands in Spanish over the loudspeaker, and he's following my commands. Driver, with your right hand, reach outside, open the door, keep your hands, you know, the whole thing. And he's doing it all. And I got him down on his knees, I don't know, 15, 20 feet away. And the next step is to make him prone out so that we can run up and handcuff him behind his back, you know, with the greatest safety. So I'm telling him, okay, prone out, put your arms out to your side and prone out. And he's telling me no. He's talking and I can't hear him. So I asked my partner, I said, what is he saying? Partner laughs and he says, he's saying, go ahead and shoot me now, but I'm not going to lay on the asphalt when it's 100 degrees. just kill me now. Fair enough. So we went up there and hooked him up while he was still on his knees. Anyway, we got him hooked up and cuffed up and in a truck, and took his keys, and I popped that trunk. It was 361 pounds of cocaine.
And how many of the guys out walking on foot were packing drugs? Ballpark. No, we won't hold you to it.
Part of it is you don't know, because you only know what you catch. So you don't know what gets away from you. Every once in a while, when you track people through the desert, you're looking at footprints, and you say, okay, that's based on the length of stride and how heavy it goes into the sand and things like that. You know, okay, well, we've got 3 males in cowboy boots. We've got 1 female and 1 child, you know, based on shoe size and things like that. You can read the sign in the sand. But every once in a while, you would see something like your group of aliens that you thought were just plain old aliens. They laid up somewhere to take a rest, and you see duffel bag marks in the sand. Well, now we got something to talk about. I would say most of the dope, at least back then, I can't speak to now, most of the dope back then came through the ports of entry or the airport. Not that much of it came through the desert. I think we probably got most of what came through the desert, which is why they didn't do it. I did my best to work hard. You know, I wasn't lazy. When I was told to be somewhere and do something, I did it to the best of my ability. I would say probably maybe I caught 60% of what came across my area of responsibility at the time, if I was lucky. During the day, I'd say that probably went to 80%, but at night, if I caught half of them, I'd call that a win.
Yeah.
We were just spread so thin and just didn't have the resources that we needed at hand.
How many miles of border per agent, ballpark?
Oh, back then?
Or just how many miles did you have?
Back then, especially in Santa Teresa, it wasn't uncommon to have one Border Patrol agent for 35, 40 miles. Yeah, not uncommon. Now, in the city, in El Paso, it was a little different. You had more agents for a shorter distance where you could get a little better coverage. Right. But you also had more people that you were chasing. So it probably evened out.
Yeah, and had to sort out who's a citizen in El Paso and who's not.
Correct.
So that would be tough.
It was an art form. One of my favorite things I used to do, because when you approach somebody, what you're supposed to do is called, quote unquote, well, I won't say that. what you're supposed to do is identify the country of origin, okay? And so most Border Patrol agents would encounter who they know is an illegal alien, and they say, where were you born? El Paso. I was born in El Pasos. El Pasos, really? You know it's a lie, but now you got to dig further and you go back and forth. No, soy citizen. No, I'm American. American. Okay, well, now we'll talk for a little bit, and eventually he'll go, okay, yeah, I'm illegal. So, but that the whole conversation was predicated on where were you born? First question, very common. Well, I caught on to that, and I got tired of going back and forth because my Spanish still wasn't all that great, and I didn't want to argue with these people. I just want to get them in the truck and go home, So what I would do is I'd look down the street and I'd say, yep, those two belong to me. Those two are illegal right there. So I'd roll up on them and I'd say, hey, good morning, U.S. Border Patrol. What'd you have for breakfast? El Paso. Get in the truck. Get in the truck. We're done here. Yeah. So I put in for a permanent Spanish instructor position and was selected. So we headed off. By that time, the Border Patrol Academy had moved from Glencoe, Georgia to Charleston, South Carolina. And so I took a permanent position teaching Spanish full-time at the Border Patrol Academy. So,
now, how long was that stint?
I taught Spanish for 2.5 years and then moved over to firearms, which was pretty much my true love. That's really where I felt most at home and added the most value, and picked up a permanent firearms instructor. They moved the academy from Charleston, South Carolina to Artesia, New Mexico. And so I helped make the move and establish the academy there. And then Lisa and I got a little ranch halfway between Artesia and Carlsbad, New Mexico. And Lisa will tell you, once again, I drug her to the surface of the moon. I was
Georgia.
Perfectly, yeah.
South Carolina.
South Carolina, beautiful, wonderful people. We had a good church there. And now, once again, the Border Patrol says, I got some bad news for you. We're moving the academy. You have 60 days to sell a house, buy a house, and that's where your paycheck is. So we had got to roll. And I taught there firearms for quite some time. I heard of this new thing just outside of Washington, D.C. called the Force Modernization Branch.
The what?
Force Mod Branch. Their job was to go find the latest, greatest use of force tools, everything from handcuffs all the way up to mainly weapons, body armor, ammunition. But I mean, we did things all the way up to how to interdict ultralight aircraft and microwave weapons that make you feel like you're on fire so you'll run the other way, everything. And I said, well, that sounds pretty fun. And so I put in for that and got selected for that, and we moved to Martinsburg, West Virginia, just outside of, it's way up in the corner of West Virginia, just outside of D.C.
Oh, cool. And, that's pretty country.
That's where I finished my last 11 years of my job. That's where I retired from. It was a great
And that
job.
was strictly like a research and...
R&D, yes, R&D.
What kind of stuff did you come up with while you were there?
But mainly it was making sure that, for example, our body armor is constantly evolving as new technologies come available, and you can change the way body armor is made. So we were always looking at body armor, shooting it, testing it, making sure we had the best. Ammunition, same thing. New calibers come out, we process them, look at them, evaluate them, say yay or nay. Weapons, same thing, always making sure we had the best rifles, pistols, shotguns, submachine guns, grenade launchers.
Really?
Oh yeah, it was a great job. Every day the UPS man showed up with a box of something sexy. And it was like, I love my job. And you go out and just shoot it. Just shoot it and play with it, and then report back and say, this is good for the patrol, or this is not good for us. My last posting there in West Virginia at the Force Mod Branch, I got a call one day from one of my old bosses that I had worked for, and he says, "Hey, Fenley," he says, "What do you know about armor-piercing rounds?" I said, "Well, I know a little bit. You know, it was my job to know." And he says, "Are you willing to talk to some Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP?" He says, "They're just across the border and they have a problem and they could use your knowledge, your expertise." And I said, "Sure, give them my number." And about 30 seconds later, the phone rang, and sure enough, it was RCMP. And they said, "Here's the long and the short of it. We have a serial killer, and he's killing people with a .308 rifle, but the rounds are armor piercing. And we need some insight into AP rounds in .308 caliber." I said, "Okay, let me tell you what I know." And so I described the two most popular American-made AP rounds in .308. I was on speakerphone. There had to have been 7 or 8 people on the other end in Canada, and they said, "Okay, well, we have recovered the rounds out of some of the dead bodies. How do we tell if it's this round or that round?" And I said, "Well, one's a steel core. You have a magnet?" And you could just hear dead silence on the other end. They were thinking chemical analysis, send it off to a ballistics lab.
Right.
I was
Look
like,
at it
"Just
under a
put a
microscope."
magnet on it. If it sticks, it's this round. If it doesn't, it's tungsten, and it's the other round, you know." And they were like, "Okay, we can do that." And I said, "Would it be helpful for you to have exemplars of both of these rounds?"
What does that mean?
You know, live rounds that hadn't been fired, because they're dealing with just the projectile that they've dug out of cars and bodies. And they said that would be very helpful. I said, "Okay." I said, "I'll go home tonight and I'll get you a couple of each and bring it to work." And we had a contact that could do the cross-border stuff, and it'll be in your hands in day after tomorrow. And they could not believe. They said, "What? You're going to go home and get them?" I said, "Oh yeah, I'll just break open one of the ammo cans and I'll get you one of each." "You have those at home?" I said, "Of course I have those at home." What?
Who doesn't?
Yeah. That fascinated them. They were like, "That's America, I guess." And so I was able to get a couple of live rounds of each one, got them to my buddy. He met them at the border, handed them across, and I got a call about, I don't know, I guess it was about a month later I got a call. And it was one of the guys from RCMP that I had interacted with. And he says, "We got the guy.
Huh.
It was helpful. Thank you." I said, "Of course. My
Oh,
pleasure."
I would love to know the pathway.
I have no idea. It's unknown to me. But they were able to, through the ammunition, they were able to backtrack and lead them to some clues that they got the guy.
Huh.
I said,
Oh, cool.
"Okay, well, have a nice day, you know."
Yeah.
He says, "Give me your address." I figured he wanted to give me my rounds back, you know. And so I gave him my address, and 2 days later, UPS delivered an RCMP badge in a cherrywood presentation case. And it's sitting in my gun safe right now.
So you're now
With
a Royal Canadian policeman.
No, those are real men, but I have one of their badges that
Yeah.
was gifted to me, and it's one of my most treasured possessions.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
it was good, but they didn't have to do that. That was nice. We were allowed to enforce the laws that were on the books. That is not the case anymore. As we sit here today, the border is completely out of control. We might as well not have one. It's not being enforced. I was talking with another retired Border Patrol agent the other day. He and I worked in El Paso together and went some hard places. And I said, "You know what, Stan? We arrested and put in jail people for alien smuggling that Border Patrol agents are doing today. They're effectively alien smuggling. That's what they're doing. And had we allowed people in, we'd have been fired on the spot, if not prosecuted. And now they're being ordered, let these people in, give them a plane ticket to Chicago, you know, here's your EBT card. That actually meets the definition of aiding and abetting alien smuggling done by federal agents that were sworn to enforce the law. It's mind-boggling. It's difficult. It's very important to a nation to enforce its borders. If you don't enforce the borders, you don't have a nation. You just got a landmass. And we have all the mechanisms in place to do that again if we just do it. The wall is not a panacea. It's not a cure-all. What the wall is it helps direct the traffic. So if I've got a mile or 2 miles of wall, I know that very, very few people are going to cross that wall during my shift. Now they're going to go around the edges, of course, or they'll tunnel under, but that concentrates them to where I can come and get them. And so it directs traffic in such a way that makes Border Patrol agents more effective at catching the folks that are coming through. There's a reason that everybody's trying to come to the United States. We're the most exclusive country club in the world. Everybody wants to get into our pool, okay? Well, if we control who comes in and who goes out, then we can choose, if we want to, the best and brightest. Only the most exclusive Border Patrol membership. So you come here, well, what can you offer the United States? Because we're this, you come from here. What can you offer us? Well, I'm an engineer. I can build your next rocket. All right, talk to me. We'll let you in, and your family. That'd be okay. What can you offer me? Well, I can lay concrete. You know what? We got enough of that. How about no? To pick and choose the people that we want to be here, it should be very important, and it's not. I've had this conversation with many, many young Mexican males. Get them in the back of the truck, they're arrested, they're going to be deported back to Mexico. And we'd have this conversation in Spanish, okay? Why are you coming over here? Oh, well, in my country, the government's corrupt and there's no jobs and there's no way to make money and feed my family. I said, yeah, that sounds familiar. You know, about 220 years ago, we had the same situation right here. So what we did was we killed everybody that was in charge and made our own government. Why don't you do that in Mexico? Well, no, I don't need to, I don't want to fight. I don't want to, no, I just want to come here. Well, it's not that simple. It wasn't that simple for us. Why should it be that simple for you? Yeah. Mexico could be the equivalent of the United States. They have everything they need. They have warm water ports. They have the young workforce, everything that they need, natural resources. All they need is to overthrow their government like we did about 220 years ago. And then we might have to build a fence the other way and keep Americans from trying to sneak into Mexico. You asked me any final thoughts. I would just say this. I would like people to know that the Border Patrol that I joined, 1992, one of the finest organizations on the planet. They were very selective about who they took on board. You had to earn a Border Patrol badge. It wasn't given away. And I was very fortunate that they thought that I was good enough to bear that name. I'd like to see that again in larger numbers. I'm proud to have been called a Border Patrol agent. and recruited like-minded people like me, trying to find the best and the brightest and tell them, you need to be a Border Patrol agent.
What is it worth to this country to maintain and have border control? If you want us to protect the border of this country, then there is a dollar figure attached to it.
Yeah.
This is a great job. They pay me money to do this.